At 7:03 p.m. Las Vegas time, Tupac Shakur passed away, y'all.
Trouble-plagued rapper and actor Tupac Shakur is dead at the age of 25.
Rap star Tupac Shakur died last night after a brief life in a rough business.
Shakur was shot 4 times after leaving the Mike Tyson boxing match in Las Vegas in a car driven by Marion Suge Knight, the head of his label, Death Row Records.
The murder of rapper Tupac Shakur remains one of the most sensational murder cases of all time. At the height of his career, the then 25-year-old musician and actor was shot dead in the middle of the street in the heart of Las Vegas. The star's violent death caused shockwaves far beyond the rap scene. To this day, the case remains unsolved. Although there are ongoing developments, investigators are still baffled, even though someone was arrested in connection with Tupac's murder in the fall of 2023. And perhaps they will remain so forever. Because even if there are people who must know exactly what happened in the attack on Tupac on September 6, 1996, these people remain silent. One thing is clear. With Tupac's success came enemies. In this case, it's about the dark side of the US rap scene, about gang disputes between the East and West Coasts, and about conflicts with other musicians that may have ended fatally.
The East Coast don't love Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg. The East Coast ain't got no love for Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg and Death Row. Y'all don't love us.
Any artist out there want to be an artist and want to stay a star, and don't want to have to worry about the executive producer trying to be all in the video, all on the record, dancing. Come to Death Row.
Tell me, what does Tupac Amaru Shakur mean?
Okay, it means, I was named after this Inca chief from South America whose name was Tupac Amaru, but it's a lot of people named Tupac Amaru. It's like a whole tribe named Tupac Amaru. So my mom named me after this Inca chief, and I think the tribal breakdown means like intelligent warrior, something like that. But
I see.
He's a deep dude.
Tupac Amaru Shakur was born on June 16, 1971. He and his half-sister grew up with their single mother. There was a stepfather, but he was sentenced to 60 years in prison for a bank robbery. Both the stepfather and Tupac's mother, Afeni, were members of the Black Panther movement at the time. The organization advocates for the Black community and socialist values. However, in connection with their activism, the two also crossed legal lines. Afeni spends the first months of her pregnancy with Tupac in prison. She's accused of planning a bomb attack in favor of the Black Panther movement. She's arrested and imprisoned for several months before she gives birth to her son in New York. Tupac, his half-sister, and his mother live in modest circumstances until the family moves to Baltimore. There, Tupac spends what he will later describe as the happiest time of his life. He has a lot of access to culture and art of various kinds because his high school has a special focus on these areas. He engages in poetry, ballet, theater, and, increasingly, rap music. The following interview, in which Tupac reflects on his childhood, was also conducted at that time. He was only 17 years old at the time.
No, actually, I think it's, well, okay, from my mother's point, well, if you grew up happy, too happy, you know, like in fairy tale land, not fairy tale, I mean, if you grew up where, you know, every Christmas you got a present and every birthday you got a present and every holiday was a holiday and everything was peachy, your parents took care of everything and you just grew up. I don't think that prepares you for the world. You know, my mother had a really bad childhood and my father had a bad childhood and I had a bad childhood, but I love my childhood. Even though it was bad, I love it. I feel like it's taught me so much. And I feel like nothing can faze me. You know, nothing in this world, nothing can surprise me.
But just a few months after this recording, Tupac was indeed surprised by life. In 1988, the family moved again, settling near San Francisco. At this point, as Tupac himself later said in retrospect, he went off the rails. The time when he was able to express himself artistically in Baltimore was over. Instead, the family was once again confronted with harrowing reality.
I wanted to go to college. I went to school all the way and was ready to go to college. The only thing that stopped me was money. The time all the kids in my school was writing applications to go to college, I didn't have no lights and no electricity.
Tupac's mother, Afeni, was a heavy drug addict at the time. Her relationship with her son suffered greatly as a result. She regularly used crack and slid further and further down. Tupac himself starts making his money from drug deals and associates with shady characters. Although he resents his mother's addiction, as a teenager he makes money from drug deals himself. Everyday life is much harder for the family than in almost idyllic Baltimore.
They got little Italy, little everything. They don't have a little Africa, they got the ghetto, and we think that that's ours. That's not even ours. That's just what was left over.
At the same time, Tupac gradually managed to gain a foothold in the music business. His initial interest in rap had now become a real passion. This music style could be easily combined with two of Tupac's other passions, dancing and writing rhymes. Tupac not only has undeniable talent, but also manages to make valuable contacts over time. Even though his performances are only small and mostly take place in local clubs, the young rapper stands out. On stage, he has a special charisma. And in 1991, Tupac's talent and ambition began to bear fruit. He became a background dancer for the rap group Digital Underground. Later, he had small raps in the band's songs. And so the talent that would become one of the greatest rappers of all time in the years to come was finally discovered. Tupac signed a contract with Interscope Records, a well-known record company, with which he released his first album in 1991. From now on, everything seems to happen quickly, because the record is a huge success. In addition to numerous performances, Tupac now even gets roles in some feature films. In the following years, the rapper sells millions of records and is transformed from an artist into a brand. He not only shapes rap, but the entire pop culture. In his lyrics, Tupac deals with his difficult past, but also takes a stand on political and social issues. In the eyes of young rap fans and a large part of the Black community, Tupac captures the spirit of the times with his songs. Others, such as the then conservative Vice President Dan Quayle, cannot relate to his art. But such controversies only further drive Tupac's success. Almost every rap artist we see on stage today was probably inspired by Tupac, whether consciously or unconsciously. Tupac's family life is also improving again. His mother, Afeni, successfully completes a detox. The relationship between mother and son becomes closer than ever. So, in his 20s, Tupac not only has a successful career, but also a good relationship with his mother. In addition, in 1996, he falls in love with his girlfriend Kidada, with whom he soon gets engaged. But with success also comes a dark side. Tupac did not renounce the violence he knew from his youth. Again and again, he made headlines for threats, fights, and insults.
Said there were two sides to Tupac, the wonderful side and the not so wonderful.
In 1992, a scuffle broke out during an autograph session at a festival. Allegedly, Tupac then pulled a gun, but then dropped it on the ground. A shot was fired. The gun is registered in his name. He is legally allowed to have it. However, at that moment, about 90 meters from the festival grounds, a 6-year-old boy was playing in a schoolyard. He died that day. From a shot to the forehead, the police were able to match the bullet to the gun that Tupac had on him. Edie, who was there the day of the incident, recalled it in a 2017 interview.
I felt terrible, and I felt even worse because it was the first time I seen Pac cry since we was kids.
Oh, he cried?
Yeah.
All of you were questioned by the police, I assume.
Mm-hmm.
But they ultimately never found who did it.
Nope.
But Pac sort of got the blame for it.
Of course. I think he got sued.
Tupac claims that someone from his entourage accidentally discharged the weapon when he picked it up from the ground. Tupac's stepbrother came under suspicion. However, nothing could be proven against him, so that a charge was impossible. This was followed by a legal dispute with the surviving dependents of the 6-year-old. In 1995, Tupac paid the family a 6-figure sum in damages. In 1993, Tupac was arrested again for shooting at 2 plainclothes police officers. There are conflicting accounts of exactly what happened. Some say that Tupac acted in self-defense. Others claim that he was the first to draw a weapon and shoot the 2 men after an argument. The 2 police officers become entangled in contradictions. Ultimately, they agree to drop the accusations on both sides. In 1994, Tupac was seriously injured in a shootout. The incident took place 2 years before his assassination. The rapper was at Quad Studios in Times Square, New York City, when the building was raided. Tupac was hit by 5 bullets. He survived the attack, but was seriously injured. Only 5 hours after the emergency surgery that saved his life, he left the hospital against medical advice, sitting in a wheelchair. In an interview a year later, Tupac publicly suspected that he had been deliberately set up at Quad Studios. He accused the producer Sean Combs, aka Puff Daddy, as well as the rapper The Notorious B.I.G., also known as Biggie. Both are said to have known about the plan to attack the studio during Tupac's presence. In another interview, he recalls the attack as follows: "I fell to the ground. Everything in my head said, 'Pac, act like you're dead.' But it didn't matter. They started kicking me, beating me. I never said, 'Don't shoot.' I was quiet as hell." In February 1995, he was charged with raping a female fan. In the end, he was not convicted of rape, but of sexual assault, and was sentenced to prison. After 9 months in prison, he was released on a $1.4 million bail payment. The money came from none other than Suge Knight. Knight is the head of Death Row Records. In return for the bail payment, Tupac is obliged to release 3 albums with Suge Knight's record company. And that ends Tupac's time at Interscope, his previous label, where he also released his first album. And the change is perhaps the moment when Tupac's fate was sealed. It is September 7th, 1996. That evening, a boxing match is taking place at the MGM Grand. The MGM Grand is located in the middle of the Las Vegas Strip, the party mile of the infamous city. On September 7th, 1996, Mike Tyson is boxing against Bruce Halpin. Tupac is in the audience to watch the boxing match. He is with Suge Knight. Also, Tupac's fiancée Kidada and members of Tupac's entourage are on site. The first fans are already lining up in front of the location in the afternoon. Not only admirers of boxing legend Mike Tyson, but also of Tupac. Even before the fight, there is talk that Tupac will watch the fight that evening. Tupac himself spends the afternoon in a casino and wins a lot of money there. The boxing match does not last long. Mike Tyson defeats Bruce Halpin after 109 seconds. As early as 8:30 p.m., the first visitors are streaming out of the MGM Grand and onto the streets of Las Vegas. Tupac and Suge Knight are also on their way out. However, they get into an altercation in the lobby of the building. At around 8:50 p.m., Tupac, Suge Knight, and their entourage get into a fight with members of the Southside Compton Crips gang. The physical altercation is said to have broken out because Suge Knight is close to another gang, the Piru Bloods. And the Bloods and the Southside Compton Crips are enemies. There are many rumors about the exact details of the dispute in the casino foyer. A man is said to have told Tupac that Crips member Orlando Anderson had stolen a necklace from a member of Tupac's entourage that was released by his label Death Row Records. This is said to have led to a fight between Tupac and Orlando, in which members of both sides then became involved. Published camera footage from the evening of September 7th, 1996, shows Tupac and Suge Knight clearly fighting with members of the Compton Crips. Other sources state more precisely that someone from Suge Knight's entourage had been beaten up by a Crip a few weeks earlier. The man had apparently pointed this out to Tupac, whereupon Tupac is said to have opened the conflict. It is shortly after 9 p.m. when Tupac and Suge finally leave the MGM Grand. They drive back to the hotel where Tupac is staying with his girlfriend and his cousin. There, Tupac changes his clothes for the second part of the evening. He tells his cousin and his girlfriend about the fight with the Crips and enthusiastically recounts how he himself fought like Mike Tyson had done in the boxing ring. After that, the rapper and Suge Knight, the head of the record company, go to the after-show party. This takes place in Club 662, a location that belongs to Suge Knight. Tupac is due to perform there later that evening. The two of them get into Suge Knight's car. Tupac's bodyguard also wants to get in, but is stopped by his client. Tupac tells him to follow in a second car with the others. He and Suge Knight still had a private conversation to have, because Tupac was said to have toyed with the idea of leaving Death Row Records, despite the deal with Suge Knight that had gotten him out of prison. At 11 p.m., Suge Knight was briefly stopped by a police checkpoint. The music coming from his speakers is much too loud, and the rental car has no license plates. Nevertheless, Suge Knight is allowed to continue driving. Just a few minutes later, the events that we now know as one of the most notorious murder cases in recent history begin. It is about 11:15 p.m. The car in which Tupac and Suge Knight are sitting stops at a red light on Flamingo Road. A car in which a group of young women are sitting pulls up briefly on the passenger side. The women chat briefly with Tupac, then drive off. A white Cadillac then pulls up next to Suge Knight's BMW. This is the car in which Tupac Shakur's murderer is sitting. Someone in the Cadillac opens fire on Suge Knight and Tupac. A total of 13 shots are fired at the car. 4 of them hit Tupac. 2 of them hit him in the chest. Suge Knight was injured by shrapnel to the head, but remained fully conscious. The shooting lasted only a few seconds. Then the white Cadillac drove off. Suge Knight did a U-turn and steered the car west on Flamingo Road. The car came to a stop on Harm Avenue. The first police officers and emergency doctors arrived at the scene at 11:20 p.m. One of the police officers remembers the incident very well. He opens the passenger door of the car. The seriously injured Tupac falls to the ground in front of him. He is conscious, but it is obvious that his condition is more than critical.
And I looked at him and I said, "Who shot you?" And he looked at me and he was trying to get his breath together, and I thought I was going to actually get some cooperation. So he looked back at me and he said, "F you." And after he said that, his eyes kind of rolled back, he started to gurgle, and he lost consciousness.
Tupac and Suge Knight are immediately admitted to the nearest hospital. Immediately after his admission, Tupac has to undergo emergency surgery. Due to internal bleeding, his right lung is removed.
He's had a right lung removed. He's back in his room, and again, he remains in critical condition. He's in the intensive care unit.
Is he conscious? Can he communicate with his doctor?
He has been conscious. He is under a lot of medication, so he's pretty sedated at this time. He's severely injured. Suffering multiple gunshot wounds is obviously a terrible insult to the human body. So he's in very critical condition, and he's requiring intensive care, and he is receiving that right now.
A second operation followed at noon on September 8th. Suge Knight was able to leave the hospital with minor injuries on the morning of September 8th. Tupac Shakur, on the other hand, is fighting for his life. The rapper's injuries are so severe that he had to be put into an artificial coma. According to media reports, doctors believe that he has a 50-50 chance of survival. Family members and close friends rush to his bedside and stand by him day and night. They stand guard outside the hospital room for fear that someone could come in and cause him further harm. Of course, the police are eager to question Suge Knight as a witness after his release, but he is evading the investigators. The lead investigator, Sergeant Kevin Manning of Las Vegas, expresses his frustration with the investigation to the media. He criticizes in particular the lack of cooperation from Shakur and Knight's entourage, who were at the scene during the robbery on Saturday night. Meanwhile, members of Shakur's entourage, who police say are associated with the Blood Street Gang, engage in a scuffle with police. 4 of the men are taken away in handcuffs but are later released. 5 days after the shooting of Tupac, there is another death. A Crip gang member is shot while sitting in his car. there are rumors that the murder was in retaliation for the attack on Tupac. Authorities also maintain a vigil outside Shakur's hospital room to avoid any trouble. Shook, meanwhile, finally makes himself available for questioning by the Las Vegas police. However, he claims to have no further information. Tupac is in the hospital for a week. He remains in a critical condition, is on a ventilator, and continues to have seizures. On September 13, 1996, the life of the influential musician comes to an end. The doctors have stated that the cause of death was respiratory failure and cardiac arrest. Tupac Shakur dies at the age of just 25. He was only 25 years old.
He was like 1 year older than me. You know, he was only 25 years old. We was like, what the fuck?
Although the news about Tupac's critical state of health has been circulating for days, the reactions to his death are overwhelming. Even outside the rap scene, people are shocked by the musician's violent death. The fact that a music icon can be shot like that on the open street and the perpetrator can flee is incomprehensible to many. Only about 2 months after the attack on Tupac, a witness to the crime dies. On September 7, 1996, Yaki Gaddafi was in the car that was driving behind the car of Tupac and Suge Knight. He was part of Tupac's entourage. Gaddafi is not only a friend, but also a cousin of Tupac. On November 10, 1996, Yaki Gaddafi is shot dead in an apartment in the U.S. state of New Jersey. It is later said that Yaki Gaddafi was able to observe the attack on Tupac closely. He was even able to see the shooter and had eye contact with him. However, he never made a statement to the police. Unfortunately, the exact circumstances of Yaki Gaddafi's death are not publicly known. Almost exactly 6 months after Tupac's death, another rap icon dies. On March 9, 1997, Tupac's great rival, the notorious B.I.G., aka Biggie, is shot dead in Los Angeles. The murder of Biggie was never solved either. The rapper was only 24 years old. To this day, numerous legends surround both the death of Tupac and that of Biggie. Not least, there is speculation about the extent to which these two murders could be connected. We will look at this in more detail in the following chapter, when we take a closer look at a few theories. But first things first, Tupac Shakur will not be forgotten after his violent death. If anything, his fame has only been cemented by his tragic murder. To this day, Tupac's murder remains one of the biggest pop culture phenomena worldwide. Even today, Tupac's music is streamed millions of times. Documentaries are produced and books are written about him. Again and again, the media come back to the same question. Who killed Tupac, and with him one of the most successful rappers of all time? In 2018, the Netflix series Unsolved, The Tupac and Biggie Murders was released. The broadcast sparked new interest in the two mysterious murders.
Everyone seems to think they know what actually happened. Anyone who was actually familiar with Tupac or the case as it actually went down back in 1996, they say that the case is simple, and the reason that we don't have an answer 27 years later, depending on who you asked, is it just is delayed, whether it comes to, you know, young black men or people of color not being tried fairly by law enforcement, or depending on the other side, they'll call it street justice and the fact that people don't want to snitch.
There are even conspiracy theories surrounding the death of Tupac. Over the years, rumors have repeatedly been spread that the rapper was never shot and is still alive.
Because Tupac not dead. Tupac not dead.
Interestingly, one of the people who continues to push this theory is the son of Suge Knight, the man with whom Tupac was in a car when he was shot. He seems to have discovered the well-known conspiracy theory in 2019 as a promotional gimmick for himself. Via Instagram stories, he repeatedly implies that Tupac is still alive and working on new songs in the studio. Apparently, he is using the resulting attention to try to gain a foothold in the music business himself. But there are also frequent reports from outsiders about sightings of the rapper. Even after many years, the theory that Tupac wanted to escape the fame and have a quieter life is still quite popular. But much more interesting, and above all, more concrete, is the consideration of who could have murdered Tupac. You may have heard that someone was arrested in connection with the case at the end of 2023. However, it seems likely that Tupac's murder was a much more complex crime. The investigating police have been repeatedly criticized over the years. Some even believe there was a conspiracy by the Los Angeles Police Department. Indeed, there are some things that seem to have gone rather poorly during the investigation. In 2017, it was reported that the gun used to shoot Tupac was found in a backyard in Compton in 1998. Compton is a suburb of Los Angeles. However, no one in law enforcement seems to know the exact location of the weapon. According to this, a local resident found the weapon in Compton at the time. He then immediately handed it in to the local police station. It was only in 2006 that a police officer noticed the exact address where the weapon was found. At that time, the police file on the murder of Tupac was reviewed again, and something amazing came to light. The address matches the home of the girlfriend of a member of the Compton Crips, the gang with whose members Tupac had a fight shortly before his death. In the same year, the pistol found was declared identical to the firearm used to kill Tupac in a ballistic examination. After this examination, the weapon was actually sent to the Las Vegas police. Because Tupac was shot in Las Vegas, the local police are responsible for further investigations. However, the Las Vegas Police Department does not believe that the weapon found was really the murder weapon, even though the investigations by the Los Angeles police have confirmed that it is the weapon that was used to kill Tupac. A team of investigative journalists tried several years later to find out whether the weapon is now in the possession of the Las Vegas or Los Angeles police. Unfortunately, without success. Neither of the two police departments claims to have the weapon in their possession. Since then, the murder weapon has been considered lost, and the mystery surrounding Tupac's death has become even greater. The investigation quickly stalled in 1996. The police justified this by saying that the vast majority of witnesses were extremely uncooperative. Police violence against Black people is a complex issue then as it is now. Many rappers deal with it intensively and bring the problem into the mainstream with their lyrics for the first time in the 80s and 90s. In disadvantaged African American neighborhoods, many people adhere to the so-called code of the streets. In this social dynamic, the relationship with the police is very tense. This code of the streets is possibly one of the main reasons why we still know so little about the murder of Tupac today.
You said the shots came from the back. Big Dre, Orlando. Who shot Tupac?
They keep for the code of the streets. It just came from the back seat, bro.
At the same time, there's a rumor that some of the police officers in charge had close ties to Death Row Records, Suge Knight's label. However, thanks to the scant information about the murder weapon, there is at least one other connection to the Southside Compton Crips. A friend of a gang member is said to have lived where the murder weapon was found 2 years after the murder. And we know that Tupac had run-ins with members of the gang in the hours before his death. This is exactly what put the police on an interesting trail back in the 90s. In September 1997, a young man named Orlando Anderson files a lawsuit against the heirs of Tupac Shakur. That was just 1 year after Tupac's murder. Anderson refers to alleged damages that he suffered during the brawl with the rapper at the MGM Grand. Now he is demanding compensation for pain and suffering, because Orlando went down during the fight when several people from the circle of Tupac and Suge Knight beat him up. Tupac's mother, Afeni Shakur, then filed a wrongful death suit against Anderson. She claimed that Anderson was the murderer of her son, and Afeni Shakur is not alone in this suspicion. Over the years, several police officers have stated that they are certain that Orlando Anderson shot and killed Tupac. The rapper's murder could have been an act of revenge for the brawl at the casino. In addition, Suge Knight, who was with Tupac at the time, was close to a rival gang. But like so many key people in this case, Orlando Anderson is no longer alive. Just 2 years after the shooting of Tupac, Anderson was killed on May 29, 1998. He was killed in a gang shootout in Los Angeles. Until the end, he always denied being responsible for the murder of Tupac.
Is it Orlando?
Yes.
Let me just ask you point blank, did you kill Tupac Shakur?
I didn't kill Tupac. I mean, I don't know why, you know what I'm saying? They would even say something like that.
However, there will be more decisive news regarding Orlando Anderson in 2018. But until this information comes to light, there are another 20 years filled with speculation. In the US rap scene of the 90s, there is a great rivalry between the East and West Coasts. The label Death Row Records, owned by Suge Knight and Tupac's label, belongs to the West Coast. Tupac's direct and perhaps greatest rival, however, belongs to the East Coast. The rapper, the Notorious B.I.G., or Biggie for short. He is signed to Bad Boy Records. During the 90s, there were repeated verbal exchanges between Tupac and Biggie. This is common in rap, so nothing unusual. However, there are theories that the enmity between Tupac and Biggie went far beyond internal competition. Shortly before his death, Tupac released a diss track against Biggie. Tupac's then bodyguard was not impressed. He was worried that Biggie or someone close to him might take violent revenge on Tupac. Tupac's last song, Hit 'Em Up, is a wild reckoning with rapper Biggie Smalls and other protagonists of the hip-hop competition from the East Coast. A more than serious problem for the bodyguard. Just a few days before his murder, Tupac was a guest at the MTV Video Music Awards. In an interview with rapper Snoop Dogg, he's asked about the feud with Biggie. He dismisses the issue. Although he teases Biggie, he denies that there is a serious conflict.
This is our family. We peacefully coexist right now because we all cool. Everybody's here. They sell records. We sell records. Well, I guess you could call that selling records. What they do, we sell large amounts of records, and they sell a few records. And really, it's no competition. People are really making too much out of it than it is.
Before Biggie's career took off in the mid-90s, he and Tupac were even close friends. Tupac supported the rapper, who was a year younger, and helped him get his start in the music business. However, the good relationship came to an end with the first attempt on Tupac's life in 1994. As mentioned in the first part of the video, Tupac was attacked and seriously injured in a studio at the time. He himself insisted that Biggie was one of the masterminds behind this assassination attempt. Biggie always denies this, but the incident in 1994 may be one of the reasons why he is still often mentioned as a possible suspect in Tupac's murder. It is said that Puff Daddy paid the Southside Compton Crips gang to carry out the murder of Tupac. However, there is no real evidence for this, and Biggie himself has an alibi for the night of the murder. And as mentioned earlier, he was murdered himself just under half a year later. This case also remains unsolved. However, this is where the bigger conflict comes into play again. The East Coast-West Coast rivalry is a serious matter in the scene. And at the center of it all is a man whom many today see as the wedge that was driven between Tupac and Biggie. Sean Combs, better known as P. Diddy or, in the past, Puff Daddy.
Wait, he didn't just spell the word rapper and leave out a P, did he? Yep, R.P. rest in peace, Biggie and Pac, both of y'all should be.
Not only Tupac and Biggie are competitors, but especially the people behind the two. Suge Knight, who runs Tupac's record label Death Row Records, is in a public conflict with P. Diddy, who in turn manages Biggie. Thanks to Biggie's breakthrough with his first album, P. Diddy is gaining more and more power in the rap scene. It is no secret that Suge Knight feels threatened by this. Time and again, Suge Knight attacks P. Diddy on the public stage. After one of these attacks, Suge Knight's bodyguard was murdered. Suge accuses P. Diddy of having ordered the murder. Officially, the case remains unsolved to this day. Diddy is also repeatedly mentioned as a possible mastermind behind Tupac's murder. As a mentor to Biggie, he would have had every interest in eliminating his protege's biggest rival. The possibility is also raised that Diddy paid members of the Crips $1 million to carry out the murder. This theory is also quite common in investigator circles. Maybe you still remember that the argument between Tupac and Orlando Anderson flared up in the casino because of a stolen necklace. Orlando is said to have stolen this necklace from a member of Death Row Records, Tupac's record label. There is a rumor that P. Diddy put a $15,000 bounty on the head of anyone from the rival label. This is only hearsay in the context of the theory, but it is an interesting aspect. P. Diddy himself remains silent on the allegations. When asked about it in interviews, he refuses to provide any further information. So he's not confirming the rumors, but he's not denying them either. Others believe that Suge Knight himself arranged for Tupac's murder. According to this theory, Knight owed Tupac a lot of money. It was precisely because of this debt that he and his record company were sued by Tupac's mother in 1997. In addition, Tupac was said to have been planning to sign with another record label. Suge Knight himself invited Tupac to the boxing match and then offered him a ride in his car. And he did so even though he knew that the professional relationship between the two would possibly end. So in theory, Suge Knight could have ordered Tupac to be rolled out of the way so as not to have to pay him the millions in debt. According to a police officer who was on duty at the time, there is no record of Suge Knight actually being injured during the attack. There are no hospital or police records of the alleged bullet fragment wound. Suge Knight is currently serving a 28-year prison sentence, though not in connection with the murder of Tupac. In 2015, Suge Knight killed 2 people. You may know the movie Straight Outta Compton, which deals with the rap scene of the 90s. Suge Knight feels misrepresented in this movie. In January 2015, he encountered a man named Clee Sloan in a parking lot. He is the one who advised the film's producers. Suge Knight confronted him, and the two got into an argument. Suge Knight then hit Clee Sloan with a car, seriously injuring Sloan. Knight drove away and ran over his former business partner, Terry Carter. Suge Knight is now in his mid-50s. There are persistent rumors that he has a serious illness. It is questionable whether he will ever get out of prison again. Before his conviction, Suge Knight had repeatedly made cryptic comments and strange statements about Tupac's death in interviews. In principle, Suge Knight's behavior confirms exactly what the police say is the reason for the slow investigation. The witnesses in this case are extremely uncooperative. Nobody seems to want to talk to the police. However, there is one man who at least partially changes that, and thus makes himself extremely suspicious. In 2018, the case is once again the subject of much activity following the publication of a documentary. Numerous people who have an opinion on the events surrounding September 6, 1996, appear in the media again. Among them is a man named Dwayne Davis, also known as Keef D. He claims to have been sitting in the front seat of the vehicle from which the fatal shots were fired at Tupac. At the same time, he accuses his nephew Orlando Anderson of sitting in the back seat with another person. Orlando Anderson is the member of the Compton Crips who was repeatedly suspected of shooting and killing Tupac. However, Keef D initially refuses to name the actual shooter. He does not say whether he is accusing his own nephew Orlando or the second person, a young man named Big Dre, who was in the back seat. As a reason, he states that he must adhere to the code of the streets. Apart from a specific name, however, he does reveal numerous details from the night of the murder.
We came up Harlem, and here he coming at BMW. All the chicks was like, Tupac, and he was like, hey, like a celebrity, like he was in the parade. He wouldn't even been out the window, we would have never seen him.
You said the shots came from the back. Big Dre, Orlando. Who shot Tupac?
I'm gonna keep it for the code of the streets. It just came from the backseat, bro.
In the media, Keefe D boasts about being one of the few witnesses to the murder of Tupac. In interviews, he willingly shares his version of the events of September 6, 1996. He also says that he already talked to some police officers in 2010. At the time, he was facing a life sentence for drug abuse. Years later, however, Keefe is still free and talks to numerous media outlets about the death of Tupac Shakur. In doing so, he is trying to promote his book Compton Street Legend, which was published in 2019. In this book, he now claims that his nephew Orlando Anderson was the one who shot Tupac. Keefe merely admits to having obtained the weapon and having been in the white Cadillac. After the fight at the MGM Grand, the Compton Crips and especially Orlando Anderson wanted to take revenge on Tupac by shooting him. Of course, Anderson can no longer comment on this, as he was shot himself 2 years after Tupac's murder. In his book, Keefe D writes about the course of events, among other things. One of my boys in the backseat grabbed the Glock and started firing backwards. When the bullets flew, I ducked to avoid being hit. For years, Keefe D would tell the story over and over again in the media. Until 2023, that is. Because 27 years after the murder of Tupac Shakur, he is the first person to be arrested in connection with the crime.
Breaking news just into CNN. Las Vegas police have arrested a suspect in connection with the 1996 drive-by shooting death of legendary rapper Tupac Shakur.
Hey, Keith, Metro Police, come over here. Hey, Metro Police, come over here, all right? Thanks, buddy. Come on over here. Appreciate your cooperation, okay? I'm gonna stand right here in front of the car. Yep. Nope, we're going to put it down. I know, hang on. Put that down for a second, all right?
On the morning of September 29th, 2023, Keefe D is arrested in connection with the murder of Tupac Shakur. When the police approach him, he doesn't even ask why he's being arrested. He willingly went with the police officers. 2 months earlier, in July 2023, Keefe D's wife's house was searched. Evidence and clues related to the Tupac case were sought. Police confiscated numerous tablets, iPhones, USB sticks, computers, and photo files. The fact that Keefe D is now being arrested is sensational. However, Tupac's supporters agree that Keefe D is not the only murderer. Many still suspect P. Diddy as the actual mastermind who simply commissioned the members of the Compton Crips to commit the murder. Suge Knight also commented on the arrest of Keefe D from prison in an interview with TMZ, with a rather surprising statement.
Let's get one thing straight. First and foremost, me and Keefe D played on the same Pop Warner football team. And whatever the circumstances, if he had an involvement with anything, if he didn't have any involvement in anything, who want to see, I wouldn't wish somebody going to prison on my worst enemy. And I never had nothing bad to say about Orlando because, number one, he wasn't a shooter. Number two, he came to my hearing and told to let me go and told the truth. They still didn't let me go.
To summarize, you are saying Orlando was not the shooter, although you won't say who the shooter was. You are not saying whether Keefe was involved in any way in the shooting, and you are saying that if you're called to testify by either side, you will not comply, you will not testify. Do I have that right?
1,000%. I wouldn't go, I wouldn't testify, none of that. At the end of the day, free Keefe D, free Keefe D, free Keefe D.
After the arrest of Keefe D, other people in the business have also come forward. Among them was the rapper 50 Cent. On his Instagram account, he uploaded the last photo taken of Tupac. It shows the rapper next to Suge Knight in the car in which he was shot just a few minutes later. 50 Cent writes below, "Damn, so Pac got lined by Brother Love. Lowell, time to lawyer up, shit might get sticky." In doing so, 50 Cent is referring directly to P. Diddy. This is because he is also known as Brother Love. In fact, Keefe D is said to have told in 2008 that P. Diddy had given him the order to murder both Tupac and Suge Knight. Keefe D then procured the murder weapon, Now he testifies that his nephew Orlando fired the fatal shots. It will be exciting to see whether the now 60-year-old Dwayne Davis makes even more extensive statements. If there is a breakthrough in the prosecution, I will keep you updated. With Dwayne Davis, aka Keefe D, now awaiting trial, the case of Tupac Shakur will remain in the media for some time. And it is to be hoped that it can now finally be fully resolved.
We look at death from the selfish side, like, you know, that guy died. Oh, it's so sad. Why is it sad? He's away from all of this bad stuff that's here on earth. I mean, at the worst, he's just somewhere quiet, no nothing. At best, he's an angel, or he's at the next existence, or he's a spirit somewhere, you know. What is so bad about that? It's only bad for the people who he left, because you guys are mad. That's like some crab in the bucket type stuff. I mean, it's harsh analogy, but that's what it's like, though.
In retrospect, how would you say that your life has been? What would you say about your life? How would you define it?
I would say it's been like a test on my faith. You know what I'm saying? You know how, I guess his name was Job in the Bible, who God just did all of this crazy stuff to him just to make sure his faith was straight. And that's how it was. It made me, if I didn't have all of this stuff, I don't think that my feet would have been so firm to where I could stand up for anything, you know, and I would be less ready to deal with what's out.
Unfortunately, Tupac's mother will no longer live to see this. Afeni Shakur died in 2016 at the age of 69. Nevertheless, numerous other relatives, colleagues, friends, and fans are still waiting for a full resolution of the case. Because that is exactly what makes the murder of Tupac Shakur such a phenomenon. The case is definitely solvable. There are people who know the truth. Two people who were present at the murder, Suge Knight and Dwayne Davis, are still alive. And one of them, Dwayne Davis, will soon be standing trial. The question is whether one of them will eventually be willing to be specific. As I said, I'll keep you updated. I'd also be interested to hear your feedback on this video. Would you like more videos on unsolved or questionable deaths among celebrities? If so, are there any cases that particularly interest you? And what is your theory on the case? Do you think it was a hit by P. Diddy, that Suge Knight was the mastermind, or that the Compton Crips felt stepped on and shot Tupac? Feel free to write your theory in the comments. And if I've forgotten anything, any important information, please let me know in the comments as well. Otherwise, feel free to leave a like, subscribe, and activate the bell. This way, the video gets a lot of interaction shortly after uploading, and that increases the likelihood that the video will be suggested to people who have not yet subscribed to Insolito. Thanks a lot in advance. And otherwise, there is not much more to say. Have a good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on when you watch the video, and I hope to see you again in the next video. Until then, ciao guys.